Okay, welcome to our next lesson. First, we're going to start off talking about identity theft. And what is identity theft? It's a crime in which an imposter obtains personal information, such as information like social security number, driver's license numbers. It could be, for example, credit card numbers, to impersonate someone else to get a line of credit or maybe open up a credit card in someone else's name, in your name, let's say, or to acquire goods, buy things, and or services. And this is all in the name of the victim. All right, so I'm sure most of you have heard of identity theft. However, identity theft need not require cyber technology in order to execute identity theft. For example, sometimes people just rummage through other people's garbage looking for thrown away bank statements that might contain bank account numbers and the like. So that's not necessarily using cyber technology. However, in many cases, cyber technology is used for identity theft. For example, swiping information from bank databases. Sometimes cyber criminals they're able to steal information from bank databases, sensitive information, which then they can use and manipulate to impersonate someone else. Also, this is kind of scary. They can at times get away with buying this sensitive electronic information from. They can get it electronically from data brokers, and data brokers are legal. And these data brokers buy and sell other people's personal information. And many times these data brokers try to screen to make sure they're not giving away this sensitive information to a cyber criminal or someone who might commit identity theft, but this is not necessarily foolproof. And so in some cases, those who are interested in committing identity theft, they'll just simply buy other people's personal information from a data broker. And there's also this other concept that's related to identity theft. It's called phishing. And phishing is automated identity theft using spam emails, sending out mass emails, spam emails. So it's kind of, they have an automated system that just sends out tons and tons of spam emails. It's kind of, they're going phishing, so to speak. And at times they might impersonate reputable businesses and or persons. For example, you might see in a spam email an emblem from Amazon, even though it's not sent out by Amazon. And they might say something like, we've lost your credit card number on file. Please type in your credit card number and give it to us so we can correct your account with Amazon. When they're not from Amazon, but they're just out phishing and trying to acquire personal information. Okay, so next let's discuss biometric technology, which is advancing in our society. Biometric technology is technology that involves the biological identification of a person based on things like retina patterns, retina scans, voice and voice identification, fingerprints, and that can be used to combat crime. So a lot of this biometric technology is used, and in the 2001 Super Bowl, for example, all the faces of people entering the stadium were scanned and matched against the faces of criminals and terrorists. They were doing this for safety of the 2001 Super Bowl, but they were using this kind of biometric technology, scanning everyone's faces who was entering the stadium without permission, without consent, without their knowledge. And one can see that there were positive intentions. It was in order to look out for possible serious criminals as well as terrorists. So one can see that there can be immediate benefits to using this kind of technology. However, innocent faces were recorded and processed without consent. So without consent, thousands of innocent people, their faces were recorded and stored and recorded and processed and matched against the faces of criminals and terrorists. And opponents of using this kind of biometric technology, they say in the Super Bowl case that this can lead to error, and there is an error rate. So it could have been the case, for example, that someone's face was matched up to, let's say, a terrorist, and they were taken out of the game and they couldn't see the Super Bowl, even though it was just an error made by the computer program. So this can lead to error. It can also lead to abuse. It could be the case that, for example, you can imagine if this kind of face recognition biometric technology or even retina scan technology was everywhere out in the public. Um, and no matter where you went, there was always Big Brother looking over your shoulder, and always your face was getting scanned constantly. Just walking anywhere in society, then um, uh, the idea here is that this can be an abuse of a loss of privacy as well as liberty or freedom. And in this particular case, in the Super Bowl instance, just having it for entering the 2001 Super Bowl, some argue also that this is also a loss of privacy and freedom. You have a right to have privacy. If you want to walk into the Super Bowl and go to the game without having other people know about it, right? Like law enforcement and things like that, even though you've done nothing wrong, well, that's your liberty, that's your freedom, that's your right to have privacy and go to the game without having your face being recorded for it. All right, so here we can see that there are reasons given on both sides, and I hope that we can discuss this further and get deeper into it in the forum posts. Okay, so next let's discuss jurisdiction in cyberspace. So this is really interesting, this kind of jurisdiction issue in regards to cyberspace and breaking the law in cyberspace. So legal jurisdiction is based on the concept of boundaries. So for example, there's jurisdiction, and the jurisdiction marks the boundaries of, let's say, a particular law enforcement agent as far as their boundaries, as far as how far they can extend out and execute the law and attain criminals. So legal jurisdiction is based on the concept of boundaries. However, cyberspace, in a way, has no physical boundaries. You can, for example, be physically in one country, but create a cyber crime that has long-lasting effects or far-reaching effects in different places and in different countries. So the kind of possibility for cybercrime in cyberspace is kind of boundary-less in terms of boundaries for countries, nations, states, etc. So legal jurisdiction is based on the concept of boundaries. Cyberspace has no physical boundaries, so it can be difficult to prosecute cyber crimes involving multiple nations or states. So here's an example case. So different states here in the United States do have different laws on gambling. Gambling is permitted in certain states, such as in Nevada. So let's say we have Phil. Phil sets up an online gambling site where Phil lives in Nevada. So Phil lives in Nevada. He decides to set up an online gambling site. However, Joe lives in a state where gambling is illegal. It's illegal to gamble, and Joe is in that state, and Joe hops onto the internet, goes onto Phil's website, and gambles. In this situation, is Joe guilty of breaking a crime in this case? Is Joe guilty of breaking a crime? Joe was physically located in a state in which it was illegal, but Joe was on a website that was created by someone who was in Nevada where it's legal. Also, should Joe's state be able to extradite Phil to prosecute Phil? Do you think that, legally speaking, that Joe's state should be able to extradite Phil, have Phil be deported to their own state so that he can stand trial for allowing for gambling in their state, which is illegal? So we'll discuss this issue and in the forums as well. Okay, so here's another situation. In 2001, Guzman, this is a real life case, who resides in the Philippines, launched a virus. It was a nasty virus that had global reach, extending to lots of different government agencies as well as large corporations across the globe. Well, we can kind of ask these questions. Where did the crime occur? Did the crime occur in the Philippines? Did it occur in those countries for those businesses and agencies who were affected by it? Or did the crime occur in all of these places, the Philippines as well as all those various locales of people who were on the negative receiving end of the virus? Where did the crime occur? Should he be able to be extradited to other nations? Right? So he caused severe problems for computer systems and computer networks across the globe, breaking lots of laws. And should he be able to be extradited to these other nations for those laws in which he broke for those other countries' laws? Now, there are some reasons that have been given on both sides. One is that he should stand trial in any country that was harmed. Any country that he was harmed, he broke their laws, he should stand trial. He did severe damage, very costly damage to these other companies and agencies. So he should stand trial in all of these countries. That is justice in this case. However, on the other side, one might think this, if we allow for this, wouldn't we have to allow for prosecution of a foreign software company that has a product that at times crashes one's computer, but the foreign country has a lenient liability laws and permits such products from its businesses? So let's say there's a business in a foreign country X, and this foreign country is lenient in their liability laws. They allow, per their own laws, they allow for companies, let's say, who produce software programs, that if the software program, in a few cases, maybe it might crash your computer and you can't use your computer anymore. In that kind of situation, would this company who's resides in this foreign country with these lenient laws, should they be able to be prosecuted based on other countries? Other countries, their businesses might be using their software and it ends up destroying their computer and breaking that country's liability laws. Well, in that case, should they be able to extradite this one company, right, from that foreign country X and bring them over to foreign country Y, where foreign country Y has more strict liability laws that were broken by this foreign company? However, once again, this foreign company did not break their own country's laws, right? They're more lenient liability laws of country X, but this company, since their software was sold all over the world, was purchased by other companies from different countries like countries Y and Z, where their liability laws are more strict, where you can't create these kinds of products that crash people's computers at times. And given that that's the case, can these other countries with the more strict liability laws, countries Y and Z, then bring this company who resides in country X out and prosecute them or not? So this issue as well we'll discuss further in the forums and get deeper into it. All right, so next let's look at the topic of WikiLeaks. And the main stated objective of WikiLeaks is investigative journalism. That's their goal, is to be a kind of investigative journalism news agency. At least that's what they state there for. And their goal is to bring important news and information to the public so that they can know the truth. And this company is founded by Julian Assange, and you might have heard his name in the news. And the idea with WikiLeaks is that a lot of times they collect anonymous information. From people, and they then publish it, or they can send it to other news agencies to be released to the public. And they have, for example, released redacted, or in other words, information that at times some information has been blacked out or stricken out. So they have released redacted yet sensitive and confidential documents, for example, on a U.S. helicopter attack on innocent civilians. Also, they've released U.S. State Department diplomatic cables, kinds of communications between U.S. state diplomats as well as with foreign nationals. And they've also released information on the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and this can be sensitive military information which can allow, for example, our enemy to learn about our military and maybe become better equipped at killing our own soldiers and defeating us in potentially defeating us in wars and battles and things like this. So this, of course, raises very important ethical concerns. So is WikiLeaks ethical or not? There have been some arguments in favor of WikiLeaks. For example, one is that they have a right to exercise freedom of the press. Right? Isn't there a right for the freedom of the press to release information? And also, another argument that has been given is that they are like whistleblowers who bring justice. So there are whistleblowers who, for example, blow the whistle when they see that their own corporation or their own company is doing something unethical. Of course, their own company doesn't like it, and usually whistleblowers are not treated very well for blowing the whistle, but at times they can release important information for the public that, for example, this company is releasing a product that causes cancer or that harms its consumers, but they're still putting it out there even though they know this information just to try to make money. Right? So these things do happen, and isn't WikiLeaks kind of like blowing the whistle? For example, on that particular case of the U.S. helicopter and U.S. troops on purpose killing innocent civilians. Right? Isn't that blowing the whistle? Isn't that important information to be getting out about unethical activity? And here are some arguments against WikiLeaks. One is that the leaks are vast and indiscriminate. A lot of times, WikiLeaks are kind of huge data dumps where just tons and tons, a vast amount of information can be put out there. And sometimes it's indiscriminate. Not everything that's redacted should be redacted, that should be redacted is redacted. And there can be a lot of sensitive confidential information that gets put out there. Also, too, they're intended to embarrass. So just kind of the tone and the way kind of WikiLeaks operates and puts out information, there you really don't get this sense that it's, for example, with a traditional journalistic news source, that they're kind of putting it out there in a kind of objective, neutral kind of way, but rather it really does appear like, just given the tone of WikiLeaks, that they're trying to embarrass someone or some company or a country. And a lot of times the motivation for their leaks is resentment and to cause harm and threaten. It really seems like they want to cause harm and threaten lives at times. And their motivation is based on kind of hatred and resentment, a kind of bias. Also, they put innocent lives at risk, like U.S. troops putting out information about for example, military operations and things like that, that might provide a hint or a clue to enemy nations where they might be able to then use that information to and maybe be a little bit or maybe even perhaps significantly better equipped to confront U.S. troops. 5, in a lot of cases, it does not lead to the greatest utility. So remember, utilitarianism is that ethical theory in which you should perform that act that creates the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And here, happiness is pleasure in the absence of pain, and there's also qualitative and quantitative happiness. Right? There can be happiness or pleasure that is of a high quality, as well as of a high quantity, the intensity and the psychological feeling of pleasure. And a lot of times, as far as the greater good and the big picture, especially in regards to the military and how the military defends a nation, right, and the peace and security of a nation, it can lead to not bringing about the greatest utility, especially when it can put the military at risk. Okay, so with that, as far as whether or not WikiLeaks is ethical or not, that is also, I will leave open for forum posts, and we'll get deeper into it in our forum discussions. But a kind of related issue is this issue of whether or not WikiLeaks is traditional journalism or not. So is WikiLeaks a traditional journalistic organization in which case it is protected with freedom of the press? If it's a kind of traditional journalistic organization, then it should have freedom of the press. The government, for example, should not be able to stop it, for example, printing out certain kinds of information because we don't want, for example, the political state controlling the press and using only the press as propaganda, right? We want the press to be independent and be able to criticize and be critical of politicians and our government. Okay, so Benkler argues that while WikiLeaks may work with traditional media outlets by releasing info to them, it is part of a new media environment. So while WikiLeaks might work with traditional media outlets, and at times, for example, releases information to these traditional media outlets and lets these media outlets then release the information themselves, it is something different, Benkler argues. It is a new media environment. It is more global, it's more diverse with a range of actors. Right? It can be people who have a lot of sensitive information, and they might be working for the government or working in the military, and they might perceive themselves to be whistleblowers. In some cases, they might actually be whistleblowers, and they send this information out. And it can come from a wide variety of range of different kinds of actors. And here, WikiLeaks, this kind of new media environment, is interested in releasing sensitive information that can harm persons, can harm the state, can harm a country, and it can harm the military. A lot of times, traditional journalism, news media outlets will not print information that they think will, for example, harm the lives of military troops, sensitive information like that. However, this doesn't necessarily hold with WikiLeaks at all times. So should the new media environment have freedom of the press with impunity? So if Benkler is right that WikiLeaks is not traditional journalism, right? Traditional journalists, they should have freedom of the press, and that really enhances democracy, right? Having various ideas and freedom to put out various ideas and various facts, right? Various facts that perhaps maybe some people in Congress or in the government in some capacity may not want to be out there, but it is a truth, and it's important for democracies, for people who vote to know the truth, right? So they do have the freedom of press. However, should organizations like WikiLeaks that fall in this different category, as Benkler argues, the new media environment, not traditional journalism, should they have their freedom of press, where they kind of take their freedom to an even further extreme than traditional journalism generally conceived? Right? Should they have freedom of the press, or should there be limits to freedom of the press in this instance? So this is a question too we'll also get deeper into in the forum posts, and you can think here that as far as freedom of the press, freedom of speech, there can be limitations. For example, freedom of speech, you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater and cause a stampede and kill innocent lives. There are also rules, moral rules, as well as legal rules about slandering someone's name to harm their reputation and their business, and where that slander is false. And there are other things like when giving a public speech, you cannot promote violence and try to say, okay, let's go lynch this person now, or something like that. So there are limits to things like freedom of speech. So as far as WikiLeaks is concerned, should they have kind of a very broad notion of freedom of press? Should there be limitations? Are there maybe certain issues, certain things that are leaked through WikiLeaks, which maybe they have more free reign? Is there a more nuanced answer, for example? And maybe some issues they should be restricted? And why is that the case? Right? Why should we have these differences? Right? Is it on a case-by-case basis? And what kinds of reasons might be relevant in these various cases for saying, oh, this information, it's okay for it to be leaked, but not this kind of information. So I look forward to getting deeper into this particular issue and hearing your comments and your reflective thoughts on this issue. And that's it for this lesson, and I will see you for the next one.